Hello and welcome back to the interactive sessions. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Becca Gill and I've recently been working freelance with Southwest Creative Technology Network as talent development producer. I also work as an artist, producer and curator in the world of creative technology. So it's a massive privilege for me to be here today introducing projects and artists and creators in the interactive strand. So just to say, if you have any questions during people speaking, please put them in the chat and we will come back to them later. So I will introduce the wonderful creatives who are going to talk to you today. We have Sylvia and Sven. Sylvia is a movement artist, movement therapist, and associate lecturer at Bar Spa. She is a resident at the and Sven is a lecturer in games and robotics at Plymouth University and co-founder of Barobo Limited. They met at the three-day Swicton Talent Development Project Creative Content Online, which was facilitated by Fred Deacon, where they worked together on how to creatively use online space. They're now taking the project that they developed in those 3 days forward, and the project is called Sonic Dancer. So I'm going to introduce Sylvia and Sven if you want to turn on your videos and share your project with us. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you, Becca. Can you hear me well? It's all good? Good, great. So it's quite an enormous pleasure, actually, to be here with Sven. As Becca said, we just met not long ago during the weekend of the training for Content Online. And today we're going to share with you where we got to in what I would say our embryonic kind of stages in this project. So we're going to show you a short film, and then we'll be back for some questions and a chat. Anything we need to say more? Do you want to say anything,
No,
Sven? We're good?
I'm just looking forward to the discussion afterwards.
Okay, great. Let's see if it all works here on the tech side, sharing this film. Chun, chun, chun.
Sylvia's idea of having a presence or shared presence in a space was what interested me. So we thought about what could we do, and I suggested audio as one way of moving away from that, and said there's a way of doing audio localization and maybe finding a shared point in space, and then we basically started bouncing around ideas of what we could do with shared spaces and audio. The first prototype relies still heavily on a screen, but you have a focal point in the space, which is the device where you move around. And the next phase is basically moving away from that massive screen, which is so pretty, but not really useful, to move just to, as Sylvia just said, to an audio source that you feel the other person in the space, but you don't have to see them. So you get an idea of where the other person is based on the sound you create in your space. And that's one thing we could already see today, that you have sort of a soundscape which you're in, which you're so unaware of, like the noise you saw with the blue dots on the sphere, which is omnipresent, but you don't really realize. And when you saw somebody else in your space, that basically gave a couple of interesting ideas. So that's the next stage, moving away from the big screen, including the LEDs, so that you just have the single focus point, and then maybe just moving to speakers or headphones that you feel or hear the other person.
So it's really exciting to kind of know that we have a lot of potential to develop where we want to go with this, in terms of how then, my sound, if I become soundscape, how my sound will interact with Sven's sound or with dancers, and potentially how that interaction will then create a different and new sound. I think there was a moment where we were talking about, wasn't it, what does technology bring in terms of presence? And we discussed a lot about that is not replacing touch or replacing any sense of human, is actually to enlarge our kind of perception and our capacity to perceive, so that we don't need to have sight, but sight can be there, but we kind of giving another layer of how we can perceive and relate with humans, and notice what that kind of presence creates. The next plan is to send one of those to a few dancers and then start to develop or to test with dancers what we can do in terms of audio and movement. Cool. Here we are.
Hello. That was great. Sylvia and Ken. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But I think we want this to be an open conversation, don't you, about the project. So maybe I'll jump in with a few questions to kind of. Do you mind telling us a bit more about how your collaboration started?
Yeah, I you know, during the weekend with the workshop, not the weekend one, say weekend, I don't know, the online, the content online workshop, I kind of had time to reflect on things that were missing in the practice of my research, because I work with an ensemble of dancers who are really used to be in a studio, improvising and creating together. And we use contact improvisation as a way of communicating and generating this idea of working as a network when we improvise. So during this online content, there was a lot of possibilities to discuss our desires and what we would like to even dream in relation to creative online content. So it was there that I started kind of reflecting on my needs of creating something that was, you know, during the COVID especially, the ensemble started to work online, and then we noticed how much we missed being with each other. So it was from there that then connected to Sven and to how he already worked with audio with his robots. So it was really that kind of process of needing something and then meeting someone who kind of could hear what I was saying and got interested in kind of my questions about relating in online spaces.
Yeah, so that was basically the same thing, but from the opposite side for me. So I was interested in joining the workshop to see more sort of creative exploration of ideas from a different non-technical perspective. And I had a couple of things which we talked about during the workshop, and then Sylvia proposed a way of sort of feeling somebody's presence, and that gave me tons of ideas of what I potentially, where I could use technology to create something which is not just either a game or some software piece, but something which benefits more like visceral senses. And that was basically what kicked off the idea. And then we got talking, and then, which was a difficult bit given the current situation. It was really difficult to meet up. And then we developed the idea as we went along and tested it, and yeah, ended with something which is really interesting from my point of view, because it opens up a sheer possibility of next steps and spaces.
Totally, and it's really great how far you've come as well after just 3 days in such a short space of time. So we have some questions in the chat. From Dave, do you find that your own senses become trained or attuned to the augmented awareness of other performers? How long do you think it takes to learn the trust the sound as a sense?
Yeah, brilliant. I really think that with the group of dancers that I already work, we've been working on sensing in different ways, not just using sight. So that's why I want to go back to the dancers, researchers, and continue this to see. Well, we already have quite a lot of this awareness of working with sound. So it's really to test how we would develop that with people that don't have so much of that attunement. So I think, yes, I think there is a time to train that, but I think the group of people that I want to work with already have that kind of capacity. And I don't know how long it will take to work with someone that maybe is used to work in that way. But it'll be really interesting to also have on board dancers that have visually impairment, so we can also gain some information from how they perceive sound and how they relate to that notion of sound in the world. Hope that answers, Dave.
Yeah. Sven, do you have anything to add to that?
From a technical side, which is big, I'm not a dancer, and I'm really new to the entire sort of realm. And what I can say is that the current device, from my point of view, offers sort of a scope of what's possible in sensing a presence, and it's not we're really early. As Sylvia said, this is like the embryonic stage of the project, so we have something which works nicely as a starting point, and you could see that there are some sort of ways of seeing, of feeling the presence of somebody, which Sylvia and I sort of experienced when we did this this one session where we basically were both with our individual devices and moved around, and we were scoping where somebody else was in the space. And I think this is sort of the first step in that direction of engaging with the virtual presence of somebody in this space. That is our goal. That at the end of the project, once we're done releasing it to a wider audience, that you can sort of sense where somebody is and you can interact with the presence in an interesting way. But yeah.
That's brilliant. So we have another question from Seth. Do the devices used for playing the soundtrack track their own position and adjust their output based on this? Shall I ask that again? Or did it make sense?
I'm fine with the question. And so currently we're using just regular connected speakers for playing the sound, and that's one of the sort of first steps forwards. So currently the speaker itself doesn't sense or track its presence. That's what the device itself does, which you could see on the floor. But that one of the goals is with the project in the next iteration, because we can sense where the sound source is in the space, we want to adjust the output of the speaker so that we can create a living soundscape. But that's the next step. So right now, the speaker is a speaker which basically plays your body embodiment sound, and the device senses it, and then it allows it for the other person right now to visualize that in the space in real time. But for the next version, that's what we're looking for, to move away from the visual presence. As Sylvia mentioned during the video and also live, right now we're stuck to that big screen, which we want to get rid of so that you do not have to use your eyes to sort of sense somebody.
But also, sorry, just to jump in, at the moment, the use of the big screen is quite important, because when you kind of moving and you can see your sound and all the other sounds that have been captured, there's an enormous sense that you are not there in the space alone doing your own thing. So you are all the time interacting and affecting the space. So I think that it's really important that before we just move away from the screen, that we also bring that notion of what we're doing, what's the importance of our presence. So that is it's a real rich visual feedback. And then from there, take into the soundscape. So yeah, I just want to reiterate that.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Rowan asks, do you see this technology being applied in other areas, for example, to improve immersion in VR simulations?
I can start.
Go.
So yes, we see a wide variety of possible applications. So the first step for us was, because of Silvia's experience with movement and dance, to use that as one of the case studies we're looking into, because it's also there's a network of dancers Silvia knows, and they can interact with, and they have a way of expressing themselves. So they're sort of attuned to understanding movement in a way that laypersons like I am are not. But there's a space which we can move on, which Silvia basically discovered once we got working on it, which is that when you use the device in your space, it picks up basically the ambient sound of the entire environment, and you can use that and visualize it or use it through speakers to give you a feeling that you're first of all not alone, but it can create a shared presence. So you can, for example, have a device. I gave the example of your mom's kitchen, where your mom has a device, you have one, and you can feel her presence, sort of, and that's not dance related. That's basically connecting people, and that is one of the application domains which emerged, which we initially didn't anticipate. Mm-hmm. Another way could be VR and games, obviously, or other things which basically want to have this element of I would call it non-invasive presence, because we're not using a camera, so there's nobody watching you. It's just somebody listening in, which is subtle in a way that it observes you and the space. And it gives a different quality to it, which can enrich any kind of sort of other application domain. So it could be VR, it could be just presence with somebody. So that's sort of my
Yeah. I think it touches on this idea of the human need for relating, and then the situation that we are at the moment, where we're deprived of touch. We don't know exactly how we're going to relate and how that relation what is the harm or the benefit of the relation. There's so many tensions around relating at the moment. So I think that it brings that idea of relating safely, creatively, and accessibly, because the other thing is that we're quite concerned in creating something that is easily accessible, that we can, it's low tech in many ways, that it can be plugged and you can use it, and that's not super expensive. So I think there'll be lots of other kind of applications for it that we're going to discover in the next few months. Yeah.
Great. And so I suppose finally, you've talked a little bit about this, but what are your next steps with the project? How are you developing the next phase that you're stepping into now?
Well, we are having a sound technologist and composer joining us, so we can kind of play for a while and experiment with the sound and how we will then be a soundscape, and how we can develop that with the device that we already have. And then we'll have dancers working with us. So the next stage is to bring a sound specialist, I would say, that will work with myself and Sven for a while, and then we bring dancers to test the multi-user. So at the moment we tried 2 devices, and we'll be developing a few more and trying to, in this kind of sense of network, not just on a duet. What else is that?
that's basically the key parts of it as a next step. So first, actually explore possibilities of designing a living soundscape is the next super interesting and exciting step. Then bringing in dancers, because right now it was sort of me as a layperson and Sylvia interacting through it. And if we can get more people using the device, we will get exponentially more feedback on what's not working, how we need to change it, what are the things people want from it. And then from a manufacturing and building side, I'm looking into keeping it relatively affordable. So keeping like a relatively small device, which is not a bit indestructible, but not that much, but it won't break your bank, which is one of the things with technology which is easily underestimated when you think about it. So if you ask, a headset is £1,000, which not everybody can afford. And we're trying to keep it sort of low spec. And then we want to look into creating the soundscape, so bringing in speakers, headphones, as mentioned in the video, to create a localized experience for the person using it without having them to install like a million of things and a million of gadgets on the body. So something relatively low tech for the person using it as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Rowan's just made a comment. Thanks for the answer. A use case that immediately springs to mind is connecting with vulnerable relatives during this pandemic. Video calls lack a sense of touch, but that could be at least partially compensated for with a stronger sense of presence like this technology provides.
That's a really good use case. Yeah, that's one of the things which we're trying to look into once we have a device which we can give, for example, to my mom or my grandma, which doesn't require coding or setting it up complexly. And then this is one of the things which we're looking into. So getting it to people who actually want to feel presence again, but can't due to some reason, either because they have to isolate or because maybe they're just apart. Because one of working relationships could be that one has to be in a different country, and then you can still feel the presence.
And having an option to engage not just visually, isn't it? So I think that kind of really amplifies the field. It also amplifies, I guess, the way we perceive the world, because we're now so visually orientated, and everything we do to connect online is like, so we're somehow becoming less human, or we're not practicing all of our human senses, you know, in order to the way that we are interacting at the moment. So I'm very curious about that, to how we can actually explore the kind of becoming a bit more in terms of perception and take it as a process that engages all the senses. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you both. Anything else that anyone wants to ask? Please do put it in the chat quickly now. Anyone? In which case we will wrap up that session. Thank you so much, Sylvia and Sven, for taking us through the project. It's really exciting, and I think it's a brilliant embryonic idea, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Becca, for your support. Thank you, Sven.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.